Welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to talk about the daily scrums. Daily scrum is a simple, short, daily event where developers get together, talk about what they're going to do, what they've been doing, and plan in general. It's for synchronization. Like every other meeting, like every other event, it's a formal opportunity to inspect and adapt the artifacts. It's also about transparency, of course. It's very important to hold the daily scrums in the same time and same place every day, because that makes everything a lot simpler. You know that, for example, each day you're going to get together at 4:30 in your project room and talk about your plans. It's much easier than planning it every day. It takes time. So, like other events, it's time boxed, and this one is time boxed for 15 minutes. It's always 15 minutes. What we do is that the developers get together, usually in front of their Scrum board, which is a physical manifestation of the sprint backlog, which also contains the sprint goal. Sprint goal is part of the sprint backlog. They get together and they talk about their project. Now, as I told you, it's only for the developers. Only the developers participate in this meeting. Other people, as usual, can attend and watch them, see what's going on. For example, it can be the Scrum Master or Product Owner. It can be other people from other management layers in the organization, people from other projects in your organization, and even maybe your customer. It's okay. We keep talking about transparency, so it's fine, but they may not talk. They just stand in a corner and watch you. It's a good way of understanding what's happening in the project, understanding the progress inside the sprint. There's something in Scrum. When you're a product owner or a Scrum Master, you can also have the accountability of a developer, meaning that you can have more than one hat. You can work as a Scrum Master and also a developer, or a product owner and also a developer. It's not a great idea. If you can, you should separate those roles, because their accountabilities, their responsibilities will be mixed a little bit. And usually people pay more attention to the more concrete work, which is development, and forget about the abstract things like what we expect from a Scrum Master or a product owner. But in general, obviously, if a person who's a product owner is also a developer, then that person will participate in the daily Scrum as a developer, not as a product owner, but as a developer. Now, what happens here is that generally in management, what we say is that these are roles, product owner and developer. We don't use the word role in the new Scrum guide, but it's really roles. These are roles. So those are roles. Those are not people. People play those roles. So in the scenario that I explained, what happens is that the product owner doesn't go to that meeting. The same person who plays the role of the product owner goes to that meeting playing the role of a developer. So we can still say that this meeting is only for the developers. However, the Scrum Guide doesn't consider that concept of roles and mixes the idea of roles and accountability with people, and therefore it considers a type of exception. Then if the product owner is also a developer, then the product owner goes to this meeting. Or if the Scrum Master is also a developer, the Scrum Master will also go to that meeting and participate as a developer. So just for you to know, these are the type of exam material. It's not something that make any changes in your real work. So it's up to you. The other thing is that one of the responsibilities or accountabilities of a Scrum Master is to facilitate. Facilitate different things, different events, but not by default. They don't do it all the time, because It's not complicated. The developers should be able to do this. So what we say in Scrum is that the Scrum Master facilitates as requested or required. So, two different ways. If, for example, the developers see that, well, we really can't manage our daily Scrum, or we are so focused on the contents that we lose track of time or something else, then they can ask the Scrum Master to help them by facilitating this meeting. Or if the Scrum Master sees that it doesn't matter how much they try to teach the developers, they still can't do the daily Scrum properly, then the Scrum Master may decide to go there and facilitate the meeting for a few weeks, something like that. But still, the facilitation is not considered participation. We still consider it something that only the developers participate in. All right. So the whole daily Scrum event is for synchronizing, understanding what's happening in the project, what they've been doing, what they're going to do. So in general, to plan. But in order to plan, you need to understand your progress somehow. Understanding the progress in a project like this is very simple. It's just the act of moving one card from one column to the other. That your progress measurement is somehow implied there. But it's up to you. You can have different types of progress measurements inside the sprint. For example, one thing that is not mandatory, but it's very common in Agile projects, is to have a burn down chart, something like the one you see over there. So the burn down chart shows how much of the work remains. When you finish something, you take the line to go down, something like that. But it's common. It's not a bad idea, but it's not mandatory in Scrum. It's absolutely up to you. In the past, there used to be 3 different questions that you needed to answer in daily Scrum. The format was that you go one by one and each developer answers those 3 questions. What I've been doing since yesterday, what I'm going to do until tomorrow, and what problems I may have in the work I'm going to do tomorrow. It's still a good idea, it's a good practice, but it is not mandatory. You know the purpose of the daily Scrum, and it's up to you to see how you want to achieve that goal. So basically, the purpose of this event is to inspect your progress. And when we say inspecting, you always have a goal. And here, what's your goal? The sprint goal. So you will measure, you will inspect your progress toward the sprint goal. And the other one is to adapt your sprint backlog. And when we say adapt, it's every type of change in your sprint backlog based on your environment. So basically, planning is a form of adaptation when planning is not done upfront. And here, as you remember, we don't do all the planning in the sprint planning. We leave some of that for the duration of the sprint. And one part of it is done here. That's planning, and that's done to adapt to our environment. So these are the 2 main purposes. And when we do it properly, we get something out of it. We identify impediments, the problems that we have that block our work during the sprint. And when you identify the impediments as developers, you try to solve them yourself. But if you cannot solve them, or if it's too difficult and time consuming for you to solve them, you ask someone else. Who's that person? The Scrum Master. You will ask the Scrum Master to help you by solving the impediments, removing the impediments. It also, the whole daily Scrum helps you with your communications. You know that you have to get together once a day and talk about the project, because those of you who have experience of working in projects, which is most of you, know that this sounds simple, but it's something that we sometimes ignore in our projects. We don't communicate enough. We don't have a structured way, an organized way of communications. This is a very good way. And it's not only limited to agile projects. We have it in almost all agile projects. The general name for it is daily stand-up. And that's because it's very common for people to stand up in front of their Scrum board, their sprint backlog. It's not mandatory, of course, but it's common to stand up because the whole meeting is only 15 minutes. And when you're standing up, you're more conscious of the passing of time. So, hence the name, daily stand-up. But in a Scrum, it's called daily Scrum. So anyway, it improves communications. And something else that it mentions in the new Scrum Guide is that it promotes quick decision making. Now, I've never been in favor of quick decision making, and yeah. Decision making is important. It's something that you have to do it properly. It's not about doing it quickly, it's about spending enough time on decisions based on the consequences of the decisions. If the consequences are limited, then you need to do it quickly. But if it's important, you must spend more time. And there are lots of fallacies and biases that impact our decisions. And we need time in order to manage them, control them, and get a good result. So I don't feel comfortable with that thing, promoting quick decision making, but that's part of the Scrum Guide. It's good to know. Something else here is that I mentioned the impediments, the problems that people may have, and they talk about it, they mention them, they identify them during the daily Scrum. What happens in most cases is that you're together working, for example, 2 or 3 developers are working in one area and they have an impediment. There is one other developer who's had a similar experience in the past, and as soon as they mention the problem, that developer knows the solution for that and they start helping. But that's not really helping, because if you want to start talking about problems and the solutions to problems, then it's not possible to do it in 15 minutes. Yeah, it's only 15 minutes. We barely have time to talk about what we've been doing and what we're going to do, talk about progress and plan for the next day. So what we do is that in this meeting, we only mention the problems. If there's a solution, if there's a suggestion, objection, idea, we will do it after the daily Scrum. And the difference is that maybe not all developers need to be there when they talk about the solution to that problem. Maybe it's not relevant to them. Maybe only those 3 people who have the problem and the 1 person who has the solution want to get together and talk about it. That's the big difference here. All right, that was everything about daily Scrums, and in the next lesson we're going to talk about the sprint review event.